Hello, everyone. Are we on? I think there's a bit of a come on, bit of a lull. One second. I have an ad. Hello, everyone. I saw Dal Pay saying, Dr. John, Dr. John. Here we are. We did it, babe. We did it, John. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the super chat already. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We're sorry we're a little bit late. Dr. John went over everything he wanted to kind of say tonight. And we want this to be, about TYLEE. And so I'm going to work on not interrupting as much when I see a wonderful super chat donation, but our mods that are here, hopefully here, will thank you. And I just want to say thank you in advance from both Dr. John and me tonight for your support.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, let's see here. Let me pull everything up. We're going to do a little bit of screen sharing here and there. So let me make sure that I have everything I need ready. That is up. Okay. So I have two of those up. So let's get rid of this one. All right. Okay. With that being said, Dr. John, this is your show. It's the hidden hour on Wednesday nights. Oh, somebody said they can't hear you. I can hear you. Wait for a second to make sure. Oh, you are. Yep. Everyone's saying your volume should be turned up. Okay. You know what? You're kind of quiet on my end too. And when we first started talking, it wasn't that quiet. I'm not sure if you know how to fix that. And if not, I'll try to come over there and see. Is there, hold on. I agree that your microphone is a little bit
better.
Yes. Yes. Is that better, everyone?
Is that better?
Yes. How did you fix that?
Is that better?
That is better. That is better. And
no, I can't hear you, Lauren.
You can't hear me? You can't hear me at all?
I can't. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Hear you.
Everybody's asking how Anna's doing. I don't know if anyone can hear me. Everyone's saying they can hear you. Can everybody hear me?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Everyone can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's good.
Can you hear me? Wait, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So, all right. First off, everyone's asking how Anna is doing. Or Anna. I interviewed a woman named Anna this morning, by the way. So I had to work on calling Anna, and not Anna. And that interview will be coming shortly, just so you know. It was incredible. Somebody that knows both Chad, his children, and Julie Rowe. So there's a little teaser for everyone. But Anna, our nanny, our babysitter, is doing better. She sent a video from her hospital room, like an Instagram video, which she hadn't been able to do before. And I am in touch with her sister-in-law, who says that while she's still in the hospital, she is improving. And she is so grateful, as are we, for the help that you guys offered her. It's incredible. Thank you. And again, it takes a village to run this podcast. By helping her, you help us. And the kindness from this community is incredible. And so Anna is so very grateful. Thank you. All right, Dr. John, where would you like to start?
So I think I just want to start by thinking about TYLEE for a minute. I hope the victims never get lost in whatever scenarios we talk about. And today, was an emotional day for Lauren and I. And I won't get into details, but I just want to say that it's unfathomable to me that a parent would intentionally harm their child. That's the only thing I'll say. That, as a parent of a little guy, I'm just unbelievably grateful that I can be in his life, and I'm honored to have an influence on him. And I just want to be around him as long as I can. And so I think I was just reminded today of how important it is to honor people like TYLEE. And not to forget that TYLEE's life was cut way short. And it, again, as a parent, it's just unbelievable. It's unfathomable to me that TYLEE's mother, the one who's supposed to protect her, ended up taking her life. And I don't want to forget that, because that's what this is about. And so I really want to kind of honor TYLEE tonight. And all victims of abuse, neglect, homicide, filicide. It's just, it's why we do what we do. So I thought I would start with that.
Thank you. Yes, this is for TYLEE, and that's why there's been a lot of requests to start with us assessing these interviews. And it's why we wanted to start with TYLEE, because really TYLEE doesn't have a voice anymore. And this was her last voice in a way,
Right. And so, I think we're just grateful to have at least some record of TYLEE that we can talk about. And, we can see her. I think we kind of reminded each other that it was only 2 months after this interview that TYLEE's life was taken. So it's very close to the end for her. And so there's certainly an element of sorrow and grieving, in watching this video. So I'll try to keep that in mind when we go through this. But
Thank you. Do you want me to now pull up the interview to talk about it, or how do you want to continue?
Yeah, let's start with the interview. So there's a little segment at the beginning I'd like to kind of go over in some detail, and then let's play it for a little bit. And then there's another segment about 3.5 minutes in, and we'll talk about.
Okay. And I'll pull chat up on my phone for a little bit. I won't be able to see chat, or I'll try the chat, not chat. Some people thought you think I say chat when I say that. The chat. I have a stuffy nose. And so I'll try to pull that up on my phone, but for a minute, I will not have chat, but I believe Julie Holden, our moderator, is here tonight, if anything. And then, so I'll pull this up and let's see if I can do this screen share. Just a minute. All right. Can you hear me, John?
Yes.
Okay. And can you see this screen?
Yeah. Can you maximize it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I know that everyone's waiting, but let me see if I can't pull up chat really quickly so that I can see and put that up here. Here it is. Thank you everyone for your patience. We want to make sure we do this right. And we're new to screen sharing. Okay, there's everyone. Hey, everyone. All right, so I can look over and see that, but I, of course, will be focusing on TYLEE. And it looks like everybody else can see the screen too. So I'll go ahead and start it. And then you just tell me where to stop and play. All right, John?
Okay, yeah. So could you pause that?
It's paused.
Okay. And then I might ask you to play that little opening sequence again. So I would ask our viewers to really look at, really zero in on her face. I think if you look closely, you know, the leaning forward and the looking down, all of that to me is indicative of depression. You know, she obviously doesn't look happy. You know, it's clear that she's anxious. Like a lot of this footage of her is her dealing with her anxiety. There's a huge amount of anxiety here, but I think there's another piece of this that's probably less obvious, and that's her depression. I think if you look really closely, I think you'll see a lot of depression, and you can see, like, in this opening sequence, she kind of tells us that, because if you go back.
And you can talk, I mean, TYLEE
Okay.
is quiet, right? So you can kind of point it out.
So notice right here, she's fidgeting. She's playing with her fingers, right? That's anxiety. But her face is obviously, she's got a little bit of a frown. She's clearly not happy. I mean, we wouldn't expect that in this scenario, but okay, look here. Look at her face. That's anxiety doing her neck, but she looks down. This is a girl who's really depressed. I mean, that may be obvious after the fact, but you see it in this video.
Right. I see it.
So,
and you know what? I don't even know if there is sound on it, I realized.
Yeah, I hear sound.
Oh, you do? On TYLEE?
Yeah.
Okay.
I heard her humming. So this is anxiety. This is right. She's looking to fill the void or the space with something to do. So she's cracking all of her joints, which I assume is probably habitual for her.
Right.
But it's a way for her to deal with her anxiety. It's a way for her to try to relax.
Right.
So obviously a lot of anxiety, a lot of fidgeting.
Someone asked you to point out the gun, the pointing.
Oh, yeah, I think that it's probably a reference to something that she knows. I don't know exactly what she intends by that, but I'm sure it has to do with something she's watched or something that she knows.
Yeah. Right.
Again, I think that also is a way for her to control the situation. You know, she's feeling probably really anxious and helpless. She doesn't know what they're going to ask her. She doesn't know what their intentions are. She doesn't know what they know. So I mean, it's understandable that she would be anxious in this situation. But there's some real glimpses of her depression though too. So
She does. She looks sad right there.
right here, yeah. What's the time here?
3:10.
Yeah. So this sequence,
I can't hear her humming. Can you?
yeah, I can hear her.
I can't.
So the humming is a type of self-soothing. This sequence here, I think is really important because you're going to see some real depression here.
Yeah. She looks empty.
So she stops humming. She's staring off into space. Look at her face. Yep.
Yeah.
So she's got a little bit of a frown before that.
Sorry.
If you're a Nevada homeowner
East
that
Idaho
pays more than
News' ad
$67 a month for
advertisement.
electricity,
I'll skip it.
you may qualify.
Oh, Fox News. Run. I don't know what we're on. Sorry.
So she's looking down. She's got a blank stare. Her face is expressionless. I think just the leaning over too is indicative of depression. I mean, right here. She looks so unhappy. She looks so distraught. Right here. She takes her sandal off. So I think that's an interesting moment because I think she's experiencing such distress in that moment that she's looking to do something about it. So she grabs her sandal, she grabs a water bottle. From this point forward, she's mainly dealing with her anxiety by doing things, grabbing things, cracking her joints, taking off sandals. She gets up and walks around at one point. So, but I think that what I wanted to point out in that opening sequence is the depression, that I think there's some real underlying depression here. And, you know, psychologists often talk about how depression and anxiety often go hand in hand. So they're kind of different sides of the same coin.
Right.
Almost always if I diagnose someone with depression, I'm finding some type of anxiety that's close by.
Okay.
And so I think with TYLEE, the most important part of this to begin is to look at the depression, because I think the depression is what's driving a lot of it. The anxiety I see is more kind of a function of the depression or a symptom of the depression.
Right. And depression, to point out to people, because some people are like, well, you know, is she in shock? She just saw a shooting, you know, her stepdad is killed. Depression is something that she's likely been dealing with now for a while. This isn't from the shooting that she just witnessed. This is what she's been dealing with for a while. That it's been coming to this.
So I think you can pause it. And
I paused it.
yeah,
Do you want me to go back to large screen for us?
Yes.
Okay. Right.
So, you know, a couple of observations about, what's interesting about TYLEE is what's most interesting about the TYLEE interview is the fact that most of it's not an interview. Most of it's just her alone in a room. And the reason that that's important to me is because, sometimes psychologists sometimes talk about what's called parallel processes, and that is looking at a behavior in a larger context. So in other words, like, I'm not just looking at her alone in a room. I'm also asking the question, what's it like for this girl to be alone in general? What's it like for her? The being alone in a room and waiting for the interviewer to come in is in some ways a reflection of how she deals with being alone in general, and how she deals with issues around potential abandonment, right? Like,
Right.
there's more going on than TYLEE in a room. There's issues about being left alone in life, or just being left alone in general, or being abandoned or rejected, right? And so you're getting a larger glimpse that, how TYLEE is dealing with those types of issues too. So in addition to the depression, I think you're seeing some turmoil. You're seeing a lot of inner turmoil. The anxiety is reflecting fear, and it's reflecting other things. It's reflecting inner turmoil and probably some conflict, which obviously wouldn't be surprising given everything that's going on in her life. But one interesting thing to look at from her being alone and waiting is the fact that I think you can see some dependency on her mother, in the sense that you see someone who's really, really anxious being alone, right? Like, one of the things I sometimes say is, if you really want to see someone's mental health, put them alone in a room and let them deal with their thoughts and feelings and emotions and identity on their own, and see how they deal with that, right? Like, that's kind of the whole idea behind mindfulness meditation, is really to get people comfortable with who they are and with their thoughts and emotions and feelings and identity. It's the basis behind mindfulness meditation. And so you're seeing, this is kind of a version of that. This is like TYLEE trying to be mindful, but she's not doing very well at it. In the sense that she's struggling with her anxiety. And so so you see another dynamic here, which is her connection to her mother. I think what you see, in addition to what we just talked about, the depression, the anxiety, is the fact that she's probably pretty dependent on her mother. And one of the ways she deals with anxiety, or maybe the main way she deals with her anxiety, is to go to her mother for comfort. Mm-hmm. So talk about an irony, right? Like, this young adolescent girl is really, really anxious. And I think probably the way she deals with that the most is from her relationship with her mother, tragically.
Right. A lot of people have talked about the relationship with her mother, people close to the case that we've talked to, about her having a codependent relationship with her mom. And there was a question on our Patreon account wondering if TYLEE was codependent. How would you answer that? Or what are you seeing?
Well, codependency implies a mutual relationship, and TYLEE's a child. So codependency would usually apply to adults. So two adults become codependent when they kind of need each other in a dysfunctional way, and they're very dependent on each other. But I think with Lori and TYLEE, you can't say it's codependent, because most children are necessarily dependent upon their parents for, shelter, food, survival. So, I mean, yeah, I recognize that she's 16, but she's still a child, and she's still living at home. I know Lori tried to cut her loose. But I don't think that ever happened, right? But I think the more important issue is that Lori is fostering dependency. So this isn't TYLEE's fault. The fact that TYLEE's struggling to be alone and deal with her anxiety is really probably a function of 16 years of a mother who is creating dependency, a mother who doesn't want her child to grow up, a mother who wants her to be completely dependent upon her. And which again, the irony of that, right? So Lori positions herself as TYLEE's protector for much of her life. And that goes back, like goes all the way back to Joe Ryan, right? Like the claims of abuse and sexual abuse, and Lori doing everything in her power to get Joe away from her, sending the message to TYLEE that, I'm your rescuer. You need me. I'm going to, save you from this situation. Of course, Joe Ryan never had a chance, to really be with his daughter or develop a relationship with his daughter because of that. But it certainly sent the message to TYLEE that Lori was the one that was there for her, and Lori would be the one to protect her.
Lori was her rescuer, and
Yeah.
and with her
Protect her.
relation, and that also plays into her relationship with Charles. Do you think what did Lori bait her essentially into not liking Charles?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think Lori probably set up a competition between Charles and her. Family therapists sometimes talk about what's called triangulation. And triangulation, the way triangulation works is when there's conflict between two people in a relationship, they usually bring in a third party to try to diffuse it. So I think when there was conflict between Lori and Charles, TYLEE was brought in to diffuse it, and that Lori would form a really close bond to TYLEE and kind of pit TYLEE against Charles. So, there's a lot of talk about how TYLEE was so cruel to Charles. And I think there might be some truth to that, but the part that people aren't looking at is that Lori created that. Lori fostered that conflict. That Lori was using TYLEE to triangulate with Charles so that, that Charles was the bad guy. And so Lori and TYLEE, I think, sometimes might act out or become angry with Charles, and Charles just sort of took it. But, it definitely soured the relationship between TYLEE and Charles.
Yeah, thank you. And we've taken this from many people we've talked to as well.
Yeah.
About the relationship with them. Right. And so in other words, TYLEE and Charles didn't have a chance. Joe and TYLEE didn't have a, Charles and TYLEE didn't have a chance, and Joe and TYLEE didn't have a chance because of Lori.
Well, I mean, right. Joe Ryan for sure. Charles probably had more chances, but I think that my guess is that Lori did everything in her power to sabotage that relationship and to try to come between them. And I think she, I don't want to go so far as to say that there was some version of parental alienation, but that she probably denigrated Charles more than was necessary to TYLEE, and that probably didn't help the relationship.
Thank you. So in other words, this girl sitting in this interview that we all just watched, not codependent, but a dependent relationship on her mother, where she thought that only her mother could help her or rescue her. And yet her mother was going to end her life with somebody else. I don't know who ended her life. It was going to choose to end her life. It's just in a couple months, it's incredible. And so in other words, TYLEE really didn't feel like she had anywhere else to turn because her mother was it.
Right. And when she went to Rexburg, I think some of that was because of the dependency. I think TYLEE was trying to break away, probably to some degree, but she was still young. She was still uncertain of her future. And there was this dependency, and it wasn't just you see it with Charles, you see it with Lori kind of painting Charles as this bad guy and then trying to rescue TYLEE from him. Lori painting Joe Ryan as this evil villain and then trying to rescue her from him. But you also see it with TYLEE ending up in the hospital all the time. TYLEE spent a big chunk of her childhood in the hospital with pancreatitis and some other conditions that are still unknown.
Yes.
And there's that, right there, that if we're correct in assuming that Lori played a role in that, which is
what we suspect here at Hidden True Crime,
which is, factitious disorder imposed on another. And I think, by the way, this issue of factitious disorder imposed on another has kind of been lost in the shuffle a little bit in terms of analyzing Lori. So,
meaning Munchausen's, but it's
yeah,
now
Munchausen's. It's
but
called, yeah. I know. I joke a lot of times that I much prefer the term Munchausen. So yeah, let's stay with that. It's not a current diagnosis, but it's a cool term. So
yeah, it's now factitious disorder, or
right, imposed on another. So this idea that Lori may have been harming TYLEE, in other words, causing her to land in the hospital many times for whatever reasons, from what she was feeding her, maybe, right, some type of mild poisoning, who knows? But then being the hero, right, taking her to the hospital, and when she's sick, and all of a sudden she's in the hospital for a week and she's better, and Lori's the hero because Lori took her in. And so Lori creates the problem and then solves it. And
in other words, it's about attention for the person causing it. It's not about TYLEE. It's about the person causing it. In other words, or about Lori. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah. So Munchausen's is one of the components of Munchausen's, probably the biggest component, is this attention-seeking behavior. So, right. So you take your child into the hospital because you actually want attention. So you're doing it, you're getting attention indirectly through your child being in the hospital. So you're obviously causing harm to an innocent child for no reason, because of the what we call secondary gain, because of the secondary gains, or the attention or the validation you're going to get from resolving that problem. So this is another instance where Lori is creating dependency, because she's sending the message to TYLEE, I'm there for you when you're sick. I will take care of you. So, I mean, one of the biggest messages Lori sends to TYLEE all the time is, I'm the only one who can take care of you. I'm your protector.
Right. Over and over and over. And she's the rescuer and the savior, and the only one TYLEE has. Then I have to ask too, because, and Julie Holden pointed out, so in our next podcast episode, we're going to talk more about Munchausen or factitious disorder imposed on another, and share what we have found here at Hidden True Crime. But yes, one thing that came out in the Chandler evidence release, an additional thing, is that a friend stated that Lori would put Xanax in Charles's protein shakes. That's just one of several instances that we know of. And I saw that Julie Holden brought that up. So I want to say that this is something that Lori did do. And we know that, she would help JJ fall asleep with some medicine. And we've heard that from a few other people. We've heard, Cheryl Wheeler has shared with us some experiences of the children receiving NyQuil before bedtime. So those was just a few things we've heard.
Yeah, there's a clear history of, maybe poisoning's too strong. I don't know if we can prove that, but certainly medicating people, maybe tampering with their food, there's definitely, which is very Munchausen's like.
Right.
So
right.
I mean, we don't have TYLEE's medical records. I'd be really interested to see if, I don't think those are going to be available or easy to get, but it would be easy. It would be interesting to see if in her medical records they had any known causes for some of those issues.
Right.
Pancreatitis is definitely something that could have multiple causes.
Right.
So, So it definitely, given Lori's history, it certainly seems to lead in that direction.
So with us setting the stage with that, which would mean that, which would also mean that TYLEE was an object to Lori that she used when she needed, and that Lori then needed TYLEE for attention and would use her to get attention. Can we talk about, or can I ask you a little bit about TYLEE's weight? Because people have brought that up. She was a beautiful young girl. It seemed like her self-esteem was low. She had depression, and it looked as if she gained weight towards the end of her life. And she was always heavier than Lori was, in a family that put a lot of pressure on being thin. Women should be thin in the Cox household. In fact, didn't you find something? Didn't you read me something today about that?
Yeah. Let me, I have, this comes from Steve Cope's custody affidavit when he was trying to get custody of Melanie.
Okay, so really quickly, Steve Cope is the ex-husband of Stacy, who is Lori's older sister, who is now deceased. She is the mother of Melanie Pulowski. So Steve Cope is Melanie Pulowski's father. So this comes from Steve Cope, Melanie Pulowski's father, trying to share what was going on and why he wanted full custody of Melanie. Go ahead, babe.
So Steve says, and by the way, Steve has been like an endless source of knowledge, not directly, but through many of his court documents. He has a lot of insights in the Cox family, which has been very helpful. But he says here, quote, her mother, Janice Cox, which is Lori's mother, obviously, too. Her mother, Janice Cox, is obsessed with issues of weight, physical appearance, and feminine bodies. Her mother has always been obsessive about any weight gain and about issues of food intake. So what's interesting about that, obviously, is it's part of the family culture, right? It who knows?
Being a thin female is part of the family culture.
Right. And not just part of the culture, but Janice is, to use this term, Janice is obsessed. So,
and Stacy likely had, I mean, Stacy, we have
right.
stated, had anorexia. Right. So, and
right.
like, and Lori, we've discussed body dysmorphia with close friends of Lori, as well as a possible eating disorder with Lori. So TYLEE's own mother.
Right. So, yeah. So the weight, I think the weight is interesting in that context because clearly TYLEE is not fitting that mold. And so if you go back to the video and you see how intense her anxiety is, I think some of it is a function of self-soothing. You know, this is someone who's really struggling to soothe herself. You know, in fact, she's going through like every possible method of self-soothing: the knuckles, the joints, the bottle, the singing tunes, right? She's doing everything she can to calm down, and none of it is working. So she's no more anxious, you know, she's no calmer at the end of that interview than she is at the beginning. So I think some of the food is it's an issue of self-soothing, and maybe it's not unlike anorexia in the sense that it gives her some measure of control. You know, when her mother is constantly pressing her to lose weight, this gives her a little bit of control. If she's feeling really depressed and anxious, then she can control what she puts in her mouth. She's, you know, it's so in that sense, it's a little bit of a rebellion. It makes her feel good. It gives her some measure of self-soothing, and it gives her some measure of control in a situation where she probably feels very little, you know, she probably feels a lot of helplessness.
Right. Julie actually said that she thinks Lori was fearful TYLEE would outshine her. We see with JJ and Friends, TYLEE was clever, gorgeous, caring, witty, funny, vibrant, wise, inner and outer beauty. I think you're right that there was a measure of control for TYLEE in that, you know, this is clearly a family with eating disorders. But do you think Lori also caused it a little bit too?
Yeah, I think yes, I think Julie's right that there was some competitiveness. I think that actually if you have, do you have the Adam Cox?
I do.
Could you play that for a minute?
Yes. So I'll just play this rather than do a, because it's the Adam Cox interview, it's only audio, but to help it a little, make it sound a little bit better, because it's actually pretty modulated. Can you mute your Zoom for a second, John, and I'll mute mine so that it won't, at least affect our mics, and I'll see if this works. 1 second. Are you muted, or do you know? Oh, could people hear that with my mic on mute, or did it mute the whole thing? But I did just play it. Could you hear it, John? You're on mute.
Okay, yeah, I think I couldn't hear it. I think you probably needed to have your
Okay,
mic on.
so I'll play
Yeah.
it again, unmuted. Maybe just
Okay.
mute yours and then I'll
Yeah.
play it. I know we've just had this problem before. So let me play this from Adam Cox. Also, Elise, when we first started, I just want to thank her. She donated a generous super chat and said, keep doing these, Dr. John. I can't help myself. I have to thank those who do this to help us with their super chats. All right. Okay, here I am playing it. Wait, has to go further back. Okay, here we go.
It's literally nonsense. And Lori is one that loves attention. And I get it, because I love attention too. I'm on the radio. But she wants attention to a point like, if you did see Jesus Christ in the temple, you wouldn't tell anybody. And she goes around and tells everybody because she wants that attention. That she's better than everybody else. That Jesus Christ gave her a higher priesthood than the rest of us.
So, did everyone hear that? Adam Cox, Lori Vallow's own brother, saying how much she loved attention, that she would go around just talking about her visions of Jesus Christ because she needed everybody to know.
And so I think that little clip is really critical in understanding Lori, in the sense that it speaks to what Julie was talking about with the competitive part. I agree. I think that if TYLEE was somehow competitive with her in terms of, intelligence and friends and weight or looks or attractiveness, that it would have threatened Lori immensely. And so I think the control part or the self-soothing part probably comes in later, like when she's around 12 or 13. But before that, we know that Lori was kind of sabotaging her diet, giving her like calorie dense foods, right, and fried foods, and that there was some. I think there was some intent by Lori to increase her weight, even when she was younger. And that would speak to the competitive aspects of that.
Yes.
So Lori clearly wanted to be the center of attention. She was attention seeking. And that, by the way, is consistent with what we've talked about with a possible personality disorder. I don't want to venture too far down that path, but I would refer people to cluster B, of the DSM-5 for the various personality disorders there. It could be just about any or all of those. So, but Adam is perceptive in the sense that she wants to be the center of attention and she's not going to let TYLEE take it. And I think when TYLEE was heavier, Lori could point the finger at her and say, I'm look at me, I'm much older than my daughter, but I'm more attractive and thinner, and I deserve your admiration more than she does.
There's actually even a moment in the body cam footage after Charles was shot and killed where the police officer asks their weight, and Lori says hers and TYLEE says hers, and Lori looks at her as in like Lori was smiling because she was happy she was thinner, and TYLEE looked at her and said, what? Like what?
Right. And it also, sadly, when we talk about dependency and fostering dependency, I think weight was another one of those areas where if Lori sabotaged her, if Lori fed her unhealthy foods and increased her weight or played a role in that, then Lori is also the person who can rescue her, right? Lori's the person that she needs to solve that problem. If you're feeding your daughter really unhealthy foods and her weight's going up, then and you control her diet, then presumably again she's going to be the hero if she can decrease her caloric intake, which she doesn't do, but it fosters dependency in the sense that I'm sure Lori is giving her the message, I can help you with your weight, you need help with this and I'm the person who can do this because look at me, right? So it's the same dynamic.
Right.
It's the same. She's creating the same dynamic with all of these situations. Joe Ryan, Charles, her weight, her health, right? It's you're going to the hospital because you're sick, but I'm going to be the one that's, the hero, and I'm going to rescue you and get you out of there, right? It's this constant kind of conflict.
Right.
Between I'm creating this, but you still need me. I'm creating the dysfunction, but you need me to solve it.
Right. Exactly. And that's what Lori did with TYLEE her whole life. And TYLEE was this object for Lori to feel loved and to say, look at me, look how wonderful I am. Look how much I take care of you. And she did it to TYLEE too. So
right. And
TYLEE
that's the critical piece, is that the Adam Cox statement or comment you just played is so critical, because that's the commonality, is that she wants the attention. She wants the adoration. She wants to be in the center of things, the core of things. And in all of these situations, that's where she lands.
Right. Right. Some people said they couldn't hear the interview. Other people said they could. Well, it's probably like an earbuds thing, but we're going to have that interview on our YouTube channel tonight too. I know it's a few other places, but we'll also throw it on our YouTube channel for anyone wanting to listen. And I'll have the time code in the description where that is. So if you want to check it out, like about 20 minutes after we end here, it'll be up.
Just a quick summary of that, though, for the people that couldn't hear it. Adam basically says that Lori craves there's no amount of tension that's too much for her. That if she claims that she talked to Jesus Christ in the temple, most people, if they did that, they wouldn't talk about it. They'd be so humbled and grateful that they would keep that under wraps, but not Lori. Lori has to, run around and announce it to the world that she did this. And basically he says that there's just, no amount of attention that's too much for Lori.
Right. Right. With that being said, then after this interview, which clearly Lori's distraught, she's humming a song. We know what that is. We're going to share that in a little bit and talk about that too. Or do you want to,
yeah, there's just one final thought I would talk about with the weight. which is sad, actually. But so back in the 30s and 1930s, 40s, there was a disciple of Freud's. His name was Wilhelm Reich, and he came up with this idea that he called body armor. He actually later called it character armor, but the basic idea that Reich had is that people wear armor as a way of kind of defending themselves against the world. It's similar to like defense mechanisms, but at some point, some psychologists or psychoanalysts took that idea and they started applying it to the idea of to kids that were sexually abused or physically abused. And one of the things they found is that a lot of times children, both male or female, would put on a lot of extra weight to sort of defend themselves from being attractive, or defend themselves from intimacy, or from other people being interested in them, from a physical standpoint. And so this idea of body armor, I think, comes into play with TYLEE. I think she's kind of armoring herself against the world, in the sense that she doesn't really trust the world. She's afraid of many things. So I think she's got a lot of fears. She's got issues around trust, and the weight becomes a metaphor for kind of this body armor of protecting herself. She doesn't want to be hurt. She doesn't want, if indeed she was sexually abused, and that's not clear to us at the moment, but that would be consistent with that idea that she's kind of intentionally trying to be unattractive so that she doesn't get any attention for how she looks. She doesn't interest other boys or males. They don't become interested in her. So it's a defense mechanism. It's a way to protect herself.
Yeah. And it could be subconscious too, because I know that on TYLEE's Pinterest, there were many diet pages, and it was just released a picture of her goals where she wanted to eat less. And there was a friend that once mentioned that TYLEE had a dream of being the skinniest of, everyone, but often it's a subconscious thing because.
Yeah, for sure. So the origins of this term go back to Freud, and Freud was all about the unconscious. So yes, this isn't like a strategy where TYLEE is consciously saying, yeah, I'm going to put on weight so I'm not attractive. No, that's definitely not what's going on here. She's doing this in a very unconscious, unaware way,
right.
As most victims of abuse would do. They're not aware of it. They obviously know it because they're, it's unavoidable that they're going to be aware of their weight to some degree. But yes, it's very much out of awareness most of the time.
Yeah. And bottom line, TYLEE was a beautiful, beautiful girl, and she was.
And by the way, what you just said about all the diet stuff and the bulletin boards, that would point to a lot of conflict. That there's a lot of turmoil probably over the fact that she has this ideal of being a certain weight, but she can't reach it. And her mom
from her mother and her grandmother.
Right. She has this ideal and she wants it, but that's been given to her by other people, by her mother and her grandmother. And so she's probably deeply ashamed. There's probably a lot of shame going on that she can't achieve that.
Which would also affect her self-esteem, which would also make her feel dependent on her mother when she has no idea how beautiful and vibrant and wonderful she was. She didn't feel that way.
Yeah. And actually it probably became a type of self-sabotage in the sense that, and again, this is not conscious, but in some ways she was benefiting by keeping the weight on because it was a rebellion against her mother. It was a way for her to have at least some autonomy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you. Chelsea Jackman, thank you so much. I want to say, John, I have to read what she said in her super chat. She said she loves when Dr. John gets scholastic with psychology. So, and people are responding that they do too. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for talking about that. TYLEE did have everything going for her. So she was absolutely a threat to her mother. she was all the things her mother wasn't, witty and smart and beautiful. And so it is heartbreaking that her mother really did, and took her life at the end, even as extreme, took the most extreme way. Because I think in many ways, TYLEE was a threat, and her independence was a threat to Lori too, I think.
Yeah. Again, it's really hard to watch this video with the realization that in 2 months, she's going to be dead, and not just dead, but mutilated and disfigured. I mean, it's horrendous. And especially in a circumstance where someone sends the message to you that they're the one that's going to protect you, right? That they're the one that they're the only one that can take care of you. So I think TYLEE intuited that that wasn't true at some level, but that was the message she received her whole life. So sadly, she went to Rexburg believing in that message, and she never saw Chad Daybell coming either, by the way. So
Right.
I don't want to get into that too much, but I think in those last few months, obviously the influence of Chad Daybell becomes really, really important, and kind of shifts the story a little bit. But still, her mother knows, her mother's on board with it. And as I said at the beginning, it's just unbelievable. It's unfathomable that she would create this kind of dependency and then just end it that way.
Right. Colette Cox, thank you for asking everyone to like this video. It does help us. It helps our channel, which in the end helps us to be able to do more of these. So thank you for reminding everyone that are watching just to give us a thumbs up. Thank you. Many people throughout this whole thing have requested you to ask whether you felt like TYLEE could hear her mother, Lori. I think that she possibly could have, but I don't know how that would affect, whether she could or couldn't. I think we know as much as everybody watching the video, maybe, right? Or do you feel something?
I think I think it would have increased her anxiety a little bit, perhaps, but the walls did seem pretty thin, which is not the best case scenario for, I know when I go into prisons that the walls consist of concrete blocks. So there's no hearing other interview rooms, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. So it may have increased her anxiety.
Yeah. Kay Woodcock is here tonight, and she said that she and Larry are watching. And John, you are spot on, they say.
Thank you. And with you saying that, I also want to mention JJ, because I don't ever want to lose sight of the fact that a similar wrong and a similar tragedy happened with JJ, and our hearts always go out to JJ too.
Thank you.
And I think the same analysis applies to JJ, by the way. So, the dependency, JJ was younger and totally dependent upon, he had some special needs. He was totally dependent upon Lori. So, everything that applies to TYLEE can apply to JJ tenfold. And so, it's horrendous. It's unthinkable.
Right. Someone said interview room should be soundproof. I know that when Dr. John did similar interviews, they even had white noise machines in rooms, but it didn't seem like they had that there. But someone mentioned that, so I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, they should be. Yeah, I agree. They should be. I don't know where those interviews was. It looks like the Chandler Police Department. At least they should have soundproofed the rooms or something. But
yeah, or added a white noise machine. After Charles was shot and killed, we've learned that Lori had TYLEE's phone a lot after that point, even her last months. So she really, really isolated TYLEE. She then took her to with JJ to a different state, took away her, way that she could communicate with anyone. But TYLEE did leave a last Instagram post on 2 days before she was killed. And I know that many have asked us tonight to talk about that too. This last, it's heartbreaking. It's with her and her mother, who we now know was no mother. And I was wondering if I could show that really quickly and maybe we could talk about that.
Yeah, why don't you put that up?
Okay.
And even though we're not talking about it, I should mention, this is TYLEE's equivalent to the JJ pajama picture, which we believe was taken around the time that JJ was murdered. And it kind of reminds, it's a little bit like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think it takes a psychologist to interpret this, but obviously TYLEE is not happy here. She looks really distraught. She looks sad. She looks depressed. The only one who's happy in these pictures is Lori. Lori's kissing her. Lori's smiling. TYLEE's not. I mean, the contrast is stark. The contrast is actually, to me, it's somewhat frightening, because you have to assume at this point that Lori knew TYLEE's fate. And for her to act this way, knowing that her daughter is going to be killed within 48 hours, is just amazing. It speaks to many of the things we've talked about with Lori, the lack of a conscience, objectifying people, just, I don't know, so many things that we've talked about. So the personality disorder stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what I see here.
I notice a sadness in her eyes. She's beautiful. TYLEE had an incredible future ahead of her. I see a girl that deserved adventure and ready to venture out on her own, but she looks sad to me. This is what I'm seeing as a non-psychologist. And it's shocking to see, Lori kissing her when in 48 hours, we know what she's going to allow to happen to TYLEE. But I want to point out and reiterate what you just said, John, which is Lori's smiling and there are no distress emotions. And we've talked about that in our Hidden a True Crime podcast about how Lori, even after Charles was killed, she was joking with police officers. There were no distress emotions. Can you talk a little bit about what that means? Because you would think that even if Lori believed her crazy belief system, Chad's crazy belief system, she would still maybe feeling sentimental or emotional taking this last photo shoot with TYLEE. But she looks like to me that she doesn't have a care in the world, that there's no distress symptoms. So sorry, again, will you explain what that means to not have distress emotions?
Yeah, so it's something we've talked a lot about in our podcast, but the lack of distress emotions. So there's two main distress emotions that human beings have. One is fear and the other is sadness. And a lot of the research has shown, this is research by James Blair, who's a British psychologist, that the lack of distress emotions is commonly associated with people that are psychopaths. Psychopaths don't feel fear and they don't feel sadness. So when people are in distress, typically if someone's experiencing fear or they're feeling sad and they're in tears for whatever reasons, it's a natural human tendency for most of us to reach out to those people and to try to comfort them. And with psychopaths, that's not true. Some of this has been tied to the amygdala, which is a part of the brain that processes emotions, but psychopaths they aren't like normal people in the sense that when people are in distress, they don't care. And yeah, the picture of Lori smiling, let's assume that, it's chilling, right? Because let's assume she knows that Tylee's going to be murdered in 2 days. Tylee is sad. Tylee's distraught and she's smiling. Does that mean that she's celebrating the fact that her daughter's about to die? Like, what is going on there? Right? Is it because she thinks that the world is going to come to an end and she'll be a part of the 144,000? I mean, I don't think so, because at this point, Tylee knows she's been labeled as a zombie, and we know what happens to zombies. So it's a really frightening picture there.
Thank you. I'll go back to both of us, and I'll share something else. We know that here we go. We know that we've all heard that Tylee was deemed a zombie by her mother. Melanie Gibb has stated that. I had an interview this morning. I mentioned a woman named Anna. Anna was able to provide us with some so the infamous Reddit email. If you don't know what that is, people in chat can hopefully help you understand. But the infamous Reddit email, when it came out early in the case, was fascinating how true it was. Well, about a month ago, we received a really interesting email from somebody who said many of the lines were redacted in that email. And I have all the redacted lines. I have the full Reddit email. And she sent it to us, all the redacted lines. And we have that, and we'll share it soon. What's been interesting is this happened before. This was the information I said I was going to share earlier, but she's done an interview and we're going to share everything there. So there's a little bit about what we know now. But what was interesting is the lines that she told us were redacted. When the Chandler evidence release came, some of that came out, like Melanie Gibbs' head feeling warm in the temple and some other information. So it's looking to really, to be accurate. I just want to share one redacted. So one line that was supposedly redacted in the infamous Reddit email, but we now have. And it's heartbreaking. It's a story. It's not a new story. It's a story of Tylee being called a zombie. But I just want to read this to you. So this comes from Anna, a woman I interviewed this morning, and she confirmed this again in our interview today. So this part of the first part here is the original Reddit email. Lori, meanwhile, is telling Melanie that she can't wait to have sex with Chad and how it is such an important part of who you are and everyone should be having it at least once a day. And once she was with Chad, they would be having it 3 times a day. Chad and Lori told Melanie that Alex, Kay, and TYLEE have now become zombies. Now, by the way, Kay, congratulations on being a zombie. You're a good person. So now, because all good people are named zombies. Now, this next part was redacted, but we now have it. Melanie talks to Lori all of the time after Lori moves to Rexburg. So Melanie Gibb talks to Lori all of the time after Lori moves to Rexburg. In September, they were on the phone. TYLEE and Alex were in the background. TYLEE was yelling at her mother to get off the phone. TYLEE was always yelling at her mother about how she was always on the phone. Lori said that TYLEE had turned zombie. Melanie went to visit Lori. TYLEE was not there. Melanie asked about her, and Lori said that TYLEE had moved on. TYLEE's things were not in the house anymore. I bring that up because I just cannot imagine being TYLEE Ryan being completely alone. She had JJ. I'm grateful that they had each other during those last months, but she was completely alone in a foreign place without anybody else, with her mother in a foreign relationship, and her mother calls her a zombie. and she knows what happens to zombies. Lori was very clear why Charles was killed. He talked about it. I just can't imagine that feeling. And I guess I want to ask you, in some ways, did TYLEE maybe know what was going to be happening?
I think those last pictures you showed, her last Instagram pics before she was murdered, would tend to indicate that. She's distraught. Her mother's smiling and gleeful, and clearly TYLEE's not. She's not going along with that. So I'd like to say that I don't believe she knew she was going to get killed, but I think she intuited that something was wrong. She knew that she was labeled a zombie, and she knew what that meant. I think there was a lot of distress and a lot of inner turmoil at the end, and a lot of, I think her depression was probably really, really severe. So it's hard not to really empathize with TYLEE at that point. I mean, it was horrendous.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you, everyone, for the super chats you're sending. They mean a lot. Thank you, Kate Marlowe. Thank you, Kathleen Smith. Thank you so much. And thank you, Kay, for your kind words, and for also saying that Chad was the most evil stepdad. And he was. And yes, people will point out Chad wasn't actually their stepdad, but he was engaged. He knew he would have been. So,
Yeah. Right.
he was in that sense. But thank you for sharing what you have tonight. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, or should we talk about the song?
Yeah, let's go to the song, and then maybe we can take a few questions. But I think the song that we were trying to figure out, that TYLEE sings quite frequently in the interview room, it turns out to be really important. So do you want to talk about that?
It's from the Disney movie Moana, which takes place in Hawaii, which we know was one of TYLEE's favorite places. She loved Hawaii. So I'm sure it was a very special place to her. And here are the lyrics. I want to read the lyrics. So this was one of the songs that she was humming in that video that really was self-soothing. So she picked this song to hum. She says, "I've been staring at the edge of the water long as I can remember, never really knowing why. I wish I could be the perfect daughter, but I come back to the water no matter how hard I try. Every turn I take, every trail I track, every path I make, every road leads back to the place where I know I cannot go, where I long to be. See the line where the sky meets the sea? It calls me, and no one knows how far it goes. If the wind in my sail on the sea stays behind me, one day I'll know. If I go, there is just no telling how far I'll go. I know everyone on this island seems so happy on this island. Everything is by design. I know everybody on this island has a role on this island, so maybe I can roll with mine. I can lead with pride. I can make us strong. I'll be satisfied if I play along, but the voice inside me sings a different song. What is wrong with me? See the light, it shines on the sea, it's blinding, but no one knows how deep it goes. And it seems like it's calling out to me. So come find me and let me know what is beyond that line. Will I cross the line?" So there you go.
So just a few comments, a few thoughts on the song. I think it's amazing that that's the song she's singing, because as someone who's watched Moana with our son, I know when that song is sung, and it's when Moana is yearning she's yearning to go on an adventure. She's yearning to be independent. She's yearning to discover who she is, and to do that, she has to go sail the seas and find her way. And it's heartbreaking to think that that's what was in TYLEE's mind, that she she was ready to go find herself. She was ready to go on her own adventure. She was ready to break free from her mother, but she never had the chance. That her mother thwarted that. And I think that TYLEE, whether it was then or at some point soon, I think TYLEE was ready for her own adventure. And that's what the song reflects. It reflects that, you know, eventually we all need to break away and find our way and discover ourselves or who we are and what we're meant to do in life. And it seemed like TYLEE was so close to that. She was so close. But because of this dependency that Lori was so intent upon fostering in her, she didn't take the risk. And I mean, I'm not blaming her by any stretch. Believe me, it's not her fault. But what's really heartbreaking is the fact that she was humming that song, thinking about that song, and maybe she was there. Maybe she was almost there.
I think she was almost there. Right. She was. She had a lot of hope and a lot of potential. She was smart. She was funny. She was beautiful. Right. Sorry, I keep saying that, but right. I think she was almost there. Colette Cox is here tonight. And I just want to read something she wrote. She's one of our moderators from the group, True Crime Underground, Lori Daybell Cult Mom. And now, of course, like classic me, I'm lost. Here we are. She said, I'm hoping with all of this becoming more public, everyone that played a part are held accountable. Too many adults stood by and helped, allowed people to be murdered. And I agree. Where were all the adults? There were a lot of them. There were a lot of adults that could have stopped things from happening.
Right. And I mean, I know I agree with Colette, like you and I talk about all the time, the list of names of people potentially culpable is long, but it doesn't seem like, you know, for whatever reasons, that charges are forthcoming.
Right. I think the song is a good place to stop. I know that people probably were interested in hearing our analysis of TYLEE talking, but John and I both agree, and John has talked about this, that what was more important in analyzing TYLEE was what wasn't being said. Is that right, John?
Yeah, definitely. I think that we get a better glimpse of who TYLEE was just based upon her sitting in that room alone, you know, because I think that's how TYLEE felt in her life. She felt alone and isolated, and her mom wasn't there for her, and nobody was there for her. And you know, so I think we get a real glimpse of what TYLEE was going through in those last, you know, moments before she was killed. And you know, people have asked questions about whether she was telling the truth and all that. And I mean, I'm not a huge proponent of pure body language analysis, so I think it's kind of going down a blind alley. Whether she was or not is less important to me than the fact that we honor her and honor her anguish and her depression and, you know, her courage to hang in there as long as she did with a mother like Lori.
Someone did say, thank you, Levi Jane, for reminding us. We will share this. She said, but at 12:30 or so, she breaks down and she cries, and then she makes herself snap out of it. That is
Right.
true. That is an important
Yes.
moment.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, there are several moments where she tears up. And I think the crying could be somewhat related to depression, but some of it could just be that the anxiety in the room becomes so overwhelming. I think, you know, some people will cry when they're just absolutely overwhelmed with their emotions and anxiety. And I think that's part of it too.
Right. What matters now isn't whether or not TYLEE was lying or telling the truth, you know, or being coached. It was who she was and the victim she was and what she could have been had she been able to find her way out of her mother's grasp.
Right. I would prefer to remember TYLEE as someone who was singing Moana at the end, the Moana song. I don't remember the name of the song, but whatever the name of
How far I'll go.
how far out, yeah. Right, exactly. I would prefer to remember TYLEE as someone who knew how far she would go at the end, rather than as someone who may or may not have, been coached or said certain things in an interview.
Right. We can remember TYLEE singing Moana. I like that. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. Thank you for everyone's concern about Anna. She is doing better. She's not with our son tonight. A neighbor is. So these things are now hard to plan without a regular babysitter as Anna heals in the hospital. But we are continuing to try to do them every Wednesday night. So you can plan on them here. If you could give our video a thumbs up, if you could please subscribe, and if you could let people know about us in our video, it means a lot. And thank you so much for your super chats tonight as well. They also help us. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great night.